Good evening and welcome to The Square. Tonight is the 6th edition of our Burning Issues. We have this topic every last Wednesday of the month where the Square resident panelists just discuss topics that you, our viewers, have told us or have suggested to us that you'd like to see discussed. Tonight, amongst other things, we are going to touch on a couple of issues, a couple of burning issues, so to speak. And key amongst them, number one, is Rwanda's rebranding journey, how Rwanda's transformational and rebranding journey has been the last 25 years. We're also going to talk about walking the talk, gender equality. And this conversation is happening right as we're having the Global Gender Summit taking place. And then we're also going to touch briefly on the Luanda MOU, or the Luanda agreement that was set up to solve or restore relations between Rwanda and Uganda. My name is Jen Mpisi, host of The Square, and I'm joined on this Burning Issues edition with the resident panelists. And I'm going to start with you, Berna. Welcome. As always, pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, Diana.
Charles, pleasure to have you on the show.
Diana, how are you?
Good.
It also rhymes, Bana on the burning issue.
It does. And she likes bringing up burning questions.
Yes.
Do we have any midweek highlights? Usually before the show begins, as you know, we kick off with key highlights midweek that have caught our attention. Charles, anything you'd like to share?
There's a big conference going on around gender, and just before we dive into that, and there's another one coming up, a big one, ICASA. And of course, next year we have CHOGAM. And
there's Kusi also.
Yes, that too.
We won't forget Kusi.
And I always keep asking myself how prepared we are for such big conferences. I'll look at two or three things, mainly two things for the moment. One is on the entertainment. I always shopping and entertainment. And this is not really a blame game per se, but a bit of a wake-up call for the private sectors, so to speak. You would expect that you want to know. I saw a very systematic way that is done in Nairobi. They even go to the extent of knowing that if it is a UN organization, the per diem for UN officials is $750 per day. Then you find that the guys who are in that space of either shopping malls or entertainment, they are budgeting for that guy's $750. So there's a strategic, a very deliberate move to ensure that you eat every delegate's money and it stays in the country.
So to make sure delegates spend.
Yeah.
To make sure that delegates go back broke. I don't see that happening. I get very disturbed when I go to hotel lounges and I see delegates just chilling in the lounge. You know, if they were really tired and they wanted to go back to their hotel, they would be in their rooms.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that's one area that is largely untapped, and we need to be very, very strategic on how we eat their money. And that's really one on those. And then the second is really around the conference organization. And I believe the people who are in charge of either the logistics or anything around to do with the conference, it comes off as if their primary objective is to deliver a good event. Mm-hmm. And anything out of the event is almost not theirs. So a little bit related to the first one, that you find quite often delegates on their own, and it's not a good scene. Yeah.
I know some conferences or professional conference organizers add that element, visit Rwanda by night or go out of Kigali, so forth and so on. Mm. I don't know if it's applied, deliberately to every single event, but yeah, good points. Mm. And no words minced there, Berna?
Yeah, it's
midweek
actually...
highlight? I know this is what you also want to say.
Yeah, I feel that there's more that needs to be done to kind of get the economy around mice right. We've done so much around the packaging, ensuring that the registration is done right. We have the right 5-star hotels, but beyond that, there's still a huge gap. And the reason I'm saying that is because, as journalists, you go to many conferences. And now that Rwanda is hosting conferences, everyone who's coming to Rwanda will get in touch with you and say, hey, I'm coming to Kigali. Where do I stay? What can I do? And I was very surprised, like this week, when we have the Made in Rwanda Expo, it wasn't marketed to the delegates at the gender conference.
And you were at the gender conference?
Yes, yes. And so for most of the delegates, they actually just read it either in the press or social media. It would have been better if the Made in Rwanda Expo had been promoted to the delegates. I think the exhibitors in Gikondo would benefit more.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, I took some of my friends there today, and I could see there were no, it's weekdays, so people are at work. Most people go to Expo typically over the weekend. But if we had this big conference, you would have expected a bit of traffic. So if maybe whoever is in charge had provided shuttles saying, you know, go to this Made in Rwanda Expo and see what you can find. That's one. The other element is around the Made in Rwanda Expo that we are promoting. When you look at the product line, and this, I'm thinking about this because one of my friends asked me that, you know, I've seen these shoes or baskets in Kenya or the kitenge in Kenya. So I think as we promote the Made in Rwanda policy, the product line, if we say we are promoting Made in Rwanda, we need to pay attention to what is unique to Rwanda, you know, and focus on what is unique to Rwanda. Otherwise, you go to the Made in Rwanda Expo, there are familiar products that you've seen elsewhere. So it wouldn't be made in Rwanda as such, it would maybe made in Africa. I think that's
although that's a hard paper. Like, what is really unique?
I think we do have our own products that we could. The issue instead, I think, is on the quality side, because when you even look at what is on exhibition, the quality is not there really yet. The finishing is poor, so people will just buy because it's maybe cheaper, but the quality is not yet there. Now, I know that it doesn't happen tomorrow, but I think someone should be really trying to focus on that and say, tell exhibitors, if you're going to Expo, take your finest and try as much as you can to get at least the quality right. Yeah.
Absolutely. You have already touched, both of you, on what we're going to talk about. The first point is Rwanda's rebranding journey, 25 years on. And from wildlife conservation to the Made in Rwanda campaign to meetings, incentives, conferences, and exhibition strategy, Rwanda's rebranding journey has been viewed as a success. And unfortunately, oftentimes, most people think it's a facade, a carefully created facade. And I'm linking this to some of the chatter that was on social media this weekend, where some gentleman said, really, is this really real? Are the realities on the ground, do they echo what we see? And a lot of Rwandans on Twitter took to, informing this man, actually, it's real. And the head of the Rwanda Development Board, I was impressed. She actually said, come to Rwanda and I'll personally show you around. But that said, our journey has been deliberate. The transformational and rebranding journey has been deliberate. But what are your thoughts and ideas regarding our rebranding journey so far, based on this context? Charles, I'll start with you.
I'm going to give a very simplistic example. We've traveled a long journey around rebranding. I know there was a lot of campaigns that have culminated into what we have around Visit Rwanda and what have you. But I'm going to give you a very simplistic example around merchandising. When you go to, and I'm going to give two examples, two African examples of Kenya and South Africa, and that at the airports, in the matatus, in the buses, in wherever you go, if it's in the townships, in the slums, or in the offices, you'll find somebody wearing something about them that is South African, whether they're at home or they are away. Now, I was having this conversation with somebody, a good friend of mine, about a month ago, and I asked, why is it that most Rwandese, or many Rwandese that I know, that I see, will be donning their colors when there is a reason to don the colors. So Amavubi is going to play somewhere, or it's Rwanda Day somewhere, or, you know, there's a national event or there's a reason, we'll be wearing those colors. It's an extremely rare scene, and we can even start with ourselves. If you know this show is sponsored by Uzi and we have to wear made in Rwanda, I don't have a bracelet or a scarf or you know, shame on me.
I have
yes,
one.
It's kind of like how you'll find at least one in I don't know how many Kenyans wearing that that bracelet.
1 in 10. Yes.
Yeah.
Or, you know, and so many other things. They'll have cufflinks. They'll have, so it's really the point I was raising was around those merchandising. And this friend of mine told me, Charles, you need to understand that Rwandans are not as expressive as many other Africans are, and therefore their Rwandanness is in them. It's not. It's not outwardly expressed. I said, okay, fine, that's a fair point. But what does that do for us as people, as Rwandese, in terms of showing ourselves, in terms of branding ourselves? You know, if for argument's sake, MTN or Airtel or BK are going to run a branding campaign, they'll paint the whole town blue or yellow, and it will be in your face that yellow is there. Do we feel it in Rwanda? I don't think so. And I think that's the simplest of examples to give. I don't know whether we can wake up in the morning and be like that. You'll get onto a Rwandair flight from Nairobi to Kigali. You will easily tell who the Kenyans are, but you can't tell who the Rwandese are. Yeah. Yes. So I think we still have a long journey to go. That's just one of the examples. The same way, I believe we have been very deliberate on this, especially with public offices. Friday, made in Rwanda, dress down. I think we need to start thinking about some of these things. Yes.
But on that case, talking about Rwanda's rebranding journey 25 years later, on that specific example you're giving about self-branding of Rwandans, I was very impressed to see our diplomats giving their credentials to various
How
posts.
many of them, though?
It's a start. We had, I think, presenting credentials to two, different embassies, and they're donned in
the traditional garb,
garb, which is it's a good start. Brenna, on a wider context, other than individual, how Rwandans individually, connect to their brand as country, as a people, what are your thoughts on this?
I feel that significant progress has been made in terms of repackaging what Rwanda is, what it stands for, and increasingly you see that people get it. When you say Rwanda, I have to disagree with
Charles.
With Charles. We have His Excellency, who is, in my view, the biggest
brand ambassador.
Yes, brand ambassador. And you can imagine how much comes to this country just because of his brand and what he stands for. In December, we'll have the global anti-corruption prestigious awards by Qatar. They're coming here, and this is because of Rwanda's, in recognition of Rwanda's effort in terms of fighting corruption. Again, that is part of rebranding Rwanda. The new Rwanda is, zero corruption.
Amongst many other things.
Yes. So for me, I want to look at the tangibles, beyond clothing or going on social media and saying, oh, I love my country, and then you have the flag. I think what really has significant impact is what you do when nobody else is watching. If you're a Rwandan and you are a head of a big organization, people will be looking at you and judging you by what they see back at home. So when you're out of Rwanda, are you acting Rwandan or you're acting like everybody else? So I feel that as we talk about rebranding Rwanda, there are certain values that as a nation, we need to have a common understanding and take the responsibility to promote them, and say, because that is what eventually is brand, Rwanda. And in my view, I feel that is what is sustainable. I could give you another example. If you look at what's happening in the education sector, so far, Rwanda has been able to attract international institutions, international, universities. We have Carnegie Mellon, we have LU, we have Oklahoma, and probably 10 years from today, if we begin to see the critical mass of graduates from those schools, that again will be, it's part of the rebranding that we want to happen. So for me, I wouldn't worry so much about the beats, yeah, but I worry about young people understanding the values that define who a Rwandan is today and what we are trying to promote as Rwandan. Yeah.
And I just want to take you back to that question of I know, the idea is to keep our eye on the prize. Naysayers will come and go. That's happening. It's happening ahead of CHOGM. It's happening, on a daily basis on so many things. And the reason, we're talking about rebranding is some of this over the weekend, and one of many, the chatter that was saying, this is all a facade, this is not real. What do you have to say to comments that are like that? And these comments have been here, and they're here to stay, but what, as a Rwandan, when you see such comments literally questioning tangible things, you in Rwanda, you as a Rwandan who lives here, sees and experiences and lives through on a daily basis, what's your take on that?
I mean, to be honest, I couldn't be bothered.
Yes.
Because there are better things to do with our time. Yeah. There are many people who spend sleepless nights trying to get the work done. I wouldn't expect them to find time to respond to an informed person, and most of the time it's not really as innocent as it seems. It's probably someone that is being used, or because if you're genuinely interested in finding out whether Rwanda is what everybody's saying, you'll go there. I mean, there are so many ways to get to Rwanda. Visa-free, there's Rwanda. It's easy to get here. So sometimes I feel like when somebody tweets and suddenly everybody has to respond, you're giving them the prominence that they don't deserve. And I feel that some of the social media influencers are using that to kind of get a following. So they'll pick up something and throw it there, expecting that suddenly, they'll get more followers because people are trying to find out who is this person, who is this person, who is this person. And the only way, what they do essentially is follow them and then, try to check out their timeline. So I prefer that we stick to getting our hands dirty and doing the work. If anybody is genuinely interested in what is happening, they have to show up and
come see for themselves.
Yes, because you'll find that most of the time, it's not that someone really wants information.
There are ulterior motives, most times. Yeah,
I wouldn't worry about that.
Charles?
First of all, yes, I'm totally in agreement with Bana. Sometimes we give many of these naysayers, Rwandans or otherwise, a lot of undue attention, as if we don't have time to concentrate on doing better things or improving on the areas that we are quite often faulted for not doing as well as we should be doing. Are we doing everything right? Definitely not. And I believe that is where sometimes our brand gets tainted. That there are things that we can be doing properly that we sometimes do not do properly. And we've said them quite a number of times on the show. I'm sure even as we were beginning, we're talking about how we ensure that guests are fully entertained when they go, you know, such that nobody goes back and says they were harassed or they did not have a good time or there was nothing to do, you know. Areas where we can improve, we should definitely improve so that it does not give a wrong impression about the branding, but about the Rwandan brand. But Bana, just so I get myself right, I gave a simplistic example, not to negate the bigger picture. Today, I give an example. I'm a sportsman and I've been in sports administration for a while. When you see teams, when we would go with teams on multinational tournaments, it was very easy to pick out a Rwandan team from the rest, irrespective of their age. Because it has been inculcated in people that this is how Rwandans conduct themselves. They will not scream at airports. They will not pile food. You know, in one of the neighboring countries, the parliament came to a standstill because the Speaker of Parliament was telling MPs how much food they should put on their plates when they travel. That's not Rwandan, and you'll never hear such a thing happening in Rwanda. So I think to a very large extent, it's been inculcated in the children and grown up through all the people in terms of how you conduct yourself, you know, and how people perceive you, and that to a large extent is part of the Rwandan brand. And you know, we can shower those praises as much as we can. I think the true areas that do us a bit of damage are the things that we should not be known for. We should not be known for an unpredictable government. You know, for example, that you'll have a policy on land allocation for argument's sake, and then 2 years later, you say, no, we have rethought that policy. This is how we want to go about it. That you have a policy on export promotion, and you say, no, hang on a second. We want to reconsider that position. We have examples that do us injustice in terms of inconsistency in the messages that we put across. That inconsistency sometimes does our brand some negative justice. Yes.
Yeah. Personally, for me, I would like to talk about the brand Rwanda in terms of, 25 years ago, everything was a priority. From healthcare to education to justice, it was a priority. And this is not something we should be known for, like tapping ourselves on the shoulder on a constant basis. But, through lots of hard work and through really good leadership, we've managed to come to a point whereby we can actually now say, step by step, this is what we're going to focus on, so forth and so forth. And today was the second conference on the Kigali Audiovisual Forum. The fact that this sector in the creative industries, in terms of film, television, marketing Rwanda as a location, a film destination location, understanding that we have content creators who can change and tell more stories of the amazing things that are happening here. The fact that this is now a priority. And I understand, it's been a priority over 25 years where there are more urgent things. But it was really refreshing and heartwarming to see various stakeholders, Rwandan and international, collaborating to make this a reality. In the next 5 years, I feel like the same way we started off with our MICE meetings, incentives, conferences, and exhibition strategy is the same way in the next 5 years. There's going to be a strong audiovisual industry. And that, I feel, is an amazing injection into telling adequately and on a regular professional basis, what this country stands for. So it was really refreshing attending the Kigali Audiovisual Forum organized by RDB and other partners, and seeing all the young people in the room who are hungry, super hungry to learn how do we tell these stories. I mean, you look at industries, machines like Hollywood, Nollywood, Bollywood, so to speak, and the impact they have on GDP, you know. And finally, as a country, we're understanding that this is as important as other industries. So that for me was, in terms of the whole rebranding journey, very, very interesting to see. But thank you for your insights. Bern, I also like how you especially tapped on saying we have more important things to do than pay attention constantly to a lot of doubters. And I think if you listen to the doubters from the beginning, I think it would be a different story. I don't think we'd be sitting here discussing this, so to speak.
And maybe just to mention that we should expect more of that.
Absolutely.
Because, one, being an African country, I mean, even as of today, you still have people that come here and say, oh, your city is very clean.
Do you know, I honestly, I have a problem with that. I have a problem with people who come and say, this is the cleanest city in Africa. It's cleaner than other parts of Europe or Asia that I've been to. And, you know, we had one of our leaders.
Supposed to be.
If I came to your house and I commented how clean it was, I think you'd find that slightly insulting. I mean, what would I have expected? To come and find a very, you know, unkempt house? So I personally have a problem with that. But I mean, you know, so I'll take it in, you know, I'll take the compliments as one then, but I don't see why that should be something shocking.
Yeah, so
it's sad actually. Yeah, if that's the benchmark. Or
we should expect that, and you have to be ready for criticism, you know, and you just
have that thick skin, yes.
Yeah, you know, what deserves a response and what doesn't. You just, otherwise, you spend a lot of time being on the defensive, and it's worthless. Yeah.
Let's go to the next topic. We want to also touch on a burning issues edition based on current affairs, based on your comments, suggestions on the review of the Luanda Agreement. So we know that the Luanda MOU agreement was signed on 21st August. On 21st August, and it was between Presidents Kagame and Museveni, aimed at restoring relations between the two countries. We've discussed this numerous times on the square before. This is not the first time we're discussing this, but I know last time we discussed it looking at the role of media in, you know, reporting activities that were happening after the signing. But in spite of signing this, 3 months later, we have, you know, Uganda still illegally detaining and torturing Rwandans. This month, we had 2 Rwandans who were dumped at the border. I think you all saw that in the news. One of many, we had, I think it was on Monday, the rounding up of around 200 Rwandans from Kisoro. And so these things keep on, you know, happening, and I think it's high time, you know, we review in the last 3 months this agreement. 3 months after signing the Luanda MOU, what are your expectations? And Bren, I'll start with you on the way forward between relations, regarding relations between these two countries.
I mean, when we had the discussion after the signing, we tried to send a message that let's give it a benefit of doubt. And see.
I remember saying I was highly optimistic.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, it hasn't happened, and it's so painful, especially for families that had expected that they would see their loved ones come back home. Up to today, they still don't know where their loved ones are. But I will limit my comments to 2 things. One, the word spying keeps coming up. And I don't know what the issue is with spying.
Okay.
Seriously.
Yes.
And the reason I ask myself that is because I don't know if there's any state, any country that does not get involved in spying. That is one. I mean, most of the time, these embassies around the world are just full of spies. Secondly, if someone is accused of something, the least you can do is to take them to court and charge them. That's the minimum.
Within the legal frameworks
Yes.
that exist.
That's the minimum. When you don't do that, and then you keep on pushing and saying spying, then we are simply saying either you have nothing useful to say or there's something wrong. So for me, I mean, it's been difficult from the media perspective to get information. Yes, and I can tell you in-house, we have kind of come up with a code. Unless we can verify, we will not publish. Because there's a lot of ground for misinformation and also, all sorts of propaganda. So it becomes difficult. But we know what the facts are. There are families that are waiting for their loved ones. There are families that have received their loved ones in a terrible shape. They can't even recognize them because they've been beaten and just dumped. Dumped, and they can't recognize them. This is the reality on the ground. The evidence is there. These people, we know them. We can see them. Yeah? Why somebody chooses not to see that and not take that as an issue? Personally, I don't understand why. I don't understand why. And also, because deportation is not new. It's not the first time that it's happening. People are deported all the time. But there is a formal way of deporting people. Yeah, you don't just dump them. Yeah. There's procedure to follow for deportation. So if that procedure is not being followed, then we begin to wonder on what basis is the deportation in the first place legitimate or it's not? And perhaps you're not following the right procedures because it's not legitimate. So I don't have answers. It's something that you just watch and you don't know exactly what is happening. And for the media, it's come to a point where, for mainstream media, because there are lots of sites that keep on publishing. But for us, I mean, if we cannot prove, if we don't have evidence, we just stay away. And it's sad. It's sad and unfortunate because there's a story that still has to be told, But on the other hand, if I may use an example of a couple of months ago when we had the incident of a shooting on Entebbe Road, the first statement which came from the Uganda police alleged this person was a Rwandan. And within a couple of hours, the statement changed. In a day, I think that day there were like 4 versions of a statement by an institution that should be credible. So you wonder if that is happening within established institutions. Then, I mean, as media, what can you do? Yeah, so it's tough.
Charles, before we go to our break?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about 2 things. One on an aspect of misinformation, whether it is deliberate or it's not deliberate. And I never want to be in your shoes because I can imagine a big media house like the East African is not going to be rolled in the mud like all these other guys that have decided to do so. I did mention earlier on that I'm into sports, and this weekend we'll be hosting a team of old-timers from Uganda. People who stopped playing cricket, some of them are in their 50s and 60s, and it's a tradition that we do every year. Now, on one of the groups, a guy posts and says that how sure are they that they are safe to come to Rwanda? Now, definitely you could say he was misinformed because I responded and told him that in the National League, in the National Cricket League, in Division 1 and Division 2, the top players are from Uganda. They come, they play, and they go back. Currently, the Rwanda Tennis Open, the annual Rwanda Tennis Open is going on. The top seeds are from Uganda. The leading basketball team, the Patriots, have just gotten a player of Ugandan nationality who's been playing for the City Oil as a leading club there. In Nyachinama, there are senior officers from Uganda who are always coming, doing their courses and going back. So now, that level of misinformation for them to understand that what is happening to many Rwandans that go there is not happening to the Ugandans who come here is a very loud statement. And should we be making noise that we don't treat it's not an eye for an eye? Probably yes. Maybe it should not be the security organs or government organs to be saying this. It should be you and I to say this, because we see it in our day-to-day life that it's not an eye for an eye. That is number one. Number two is around the relationship, and let's not really run away from this. Is our relationship with Uganda good? Not at all.
You mean currently?
Yes, currently. Is it good currently? Not at all. Do I see it returning to the way it was? I don't think so. I think what will ultimately happen, I predict, is there will be an accommodative way of dealing with one another. But I do not see ourselves dealing or working with each other the way we used to. But that said, however, I like the tone of especially President Kagame in the last press conference, and he said this, he's been a bit consistent with that message, like there's always room for dialogue, and that's a very, very loud statement, and it is definitely the right thing. I think wherever possible, I didn't think it was the right thing for the Ministry of Sports to come up and say Rwanda is not going to participate in CECAFA. I think they should have probably allowed the team to go. On a lighter note, when I looked at the draws, I assumed that the new coach of Amavubi was like, I'm not going to risk taking my team and get humiliated. But I think that plays in their hands so much. Let's all be prepared that the situation, our relationship, our friendship, especially at the political level, will not be the same anytime soon.
Can we go for a break and come back to it, or do you want to conclude quickly?
Yeah, just to conclude that I know that in politics, there are no permanent friends or permanent enemies. Yeah, what is permanent is interest. And what is fundamental here is security. There can be no compromise on security. Yeah,
Agreed.
Agreed. Well, thank you for tuning in. We are going for a short break. Please stay tuned. Thank you.
Africa is at a crossroads, and what it does in the years ahead could leave it a big winner, or with scars of a few half-won victories. We believe it will win. Welcome to the next 60 years in Africa. The Kusi Ideas Festival, brought to you by the Nation Media Group, is happening this December in Kigali. Come and be part of a pan-African ideas transaction market and connect with great business minds and Africa's leaders in shaping Africa's future 60 years and beyond. The Kusi Ideas Festival will be in Kigali December the 8th and the 9th at the Inare Conference Center. For more information on how you can register, visit our website www.kusiideasfestival.com or reach us on the number on your screen right now. The Kusi Ideas Festival, shaping the next Africa 60 years and beyond.
Welcome to The Square, a show that brings you the very best in debate and conversations on current issues in Rwanda and beyond. Coming soon, tune in to Rwanda Television every Wednesday at 9 p.m. for the latest edition of The Square. Welcome back to The Square. We are here discussing Burning Issues Edition 6. Like we said earlier on in the show, this is where the Square resident panelists, without guests, sit and talk about issues that you, our viewers, have suggested to us. We've just been talking about, before the break, Rwanda's rebranding journey 25 years later on, as well as reviewing the Rwanda-Uganda MOU. We are now going to talk about we're going to focus on the last topic for tonight, which is more or less walking the talk, gender equality in Rwanda. As we speak, over 1,000 delegates are in the country attending the AFDB's Global Gender Summit. And, we are often viewed as one country that walks the talk when it comes to gender equality. I'm not going to spew the numbers from parliament to being ranked 6th by the World Economic Forum in terms of doing gender equality. The global indices on gender speak for themselves. But when we talk about gender parity, that's different altogether. It hasn't been achieved anywhere in the world anyway. But how do you think Rwanda can embark on making this a reality for Rwandans? Erna? I know this is something close to your heart.
Yeah, I talk about it all the time. So sometimes I feel like I'm getting monotonous.
It's very important.
But I feel that for the young generation, it's a privilege, especially for young girls to grow up in a country where they can see women with leading roles, because at least they can aspire to something. Secondly, we are seeing that there's a lot of progress in terms of legislation that facilitates participation of women. But I think until we deal with the elephant called teenage pregnancies,
that is true.
We are wasting time, because if you look at the impact of, the moment a teenager gets pregnant, what that does to their life. It's something that if we are a country that is promoting gender parity, gender equality, really need to take seriously. And we need to find ways of reducing the burden from the victim, because we still have, if you look at how we deal with teenage pregnancies, it's usually the girl that has to deal with so much. One, the shame that comes around with that, their families, dropping out of school.
And their lives in general.
Their lives, the complications. And most of the time, these men get away with it. If we can try as much as we can to kind of, I don't want to suggest castrating.
That is harsh. I'm waiting to hear Charles's comments on this.
But I just feel that we can do more when it comes to teenage pregnancies. I saw that there's a district saying that local leaders, or they have to sign somewhere
that they're not going to engage.
And for me, that is more of a populist kind of move. The real work begins in the homes. Where these girls are they safe? Because if you'll find that when you look at studies, these girls sometimes are abused by family members. So it's a small house with 8 people, and these things happen. Or their teachers, so it's someone they know. So can we find a way of dealing with that, before it actually happens? I also like the discussion around access to contraceptives for teenagers, because you want to bury your head in the sand and say you should wait, abstain, that's fine, be a good Christian. But the reality is different. People have hormones, and so when that happens, you want to make sure that they have a choice. So I think we need to, one, raise awareness, try to talk to as many, they're children really, I don't want to call them young girls, because when you're below 18, you're really a child. Try to talk to both the, the girls and the boys. One, understand their bodies, make them aware of the available options. If it happens, this is what you do, this is where you go, and be open about it, because as much as I'm a good Christian and I would like to tell people abstain, the reality is very different. So let's deal with the reality. If we don't deal with the reality, if you look at the demographic health survey, the teenage pregnancies that keep coming up, all these things show the reality is different if these children don't have access, whether we like it or not.
And this is a generational, as we've said many times on the square when we've had this discussion, it's a generational cycle.
Yeah.
A pregnant teenage mother, that child is most likely to also become a teenage pregnant mother. So when we're talking about gender equality, what you're saying is, if you want to really walk the talk, and the realities on the ground are reflected with what we see in policy, in terms of a policy and so forth and so on, teenage pregnancy is the first thing that we need to really address. Yeah. Get our heads from being buried under the sand. Charles? Before we go to our Twitter feeds.
I learned something several weeks ago. We were discussing these issues of gender, and I walked out of this show with something new.
This was with the Plan International.
Yes. It's totally changed my mind, and it got me thinking about something. I think the way we approach this gender conversation on gender equality and all these semantics is that we need to draw a line between the rural setting and the urban setting. And there is no way we are going to say that, for example, teenage pregnancies and choices, it is easier to curb it in an urban setting than in a rural setting. If you're going to talk about access to for example, menstrual pads, things are very, very different. If you're going to talk about, women in positions of leadership, it is, in an urban setting, you'll go for a job interview for a CEO, a marketing director of an organization, and it is a lot easier to have women of quality applying for the job in an urban setting than to have women who are ready to be heads of Midugudu in the village because they might probably be there to meet the quota system. So therefore, back to my conversation around what has made Rwanda get onto the map, and it's about these percentages and percentages. I think the quota system should only be applicable in the rural areas.
Hey, that's
urban setting.
That's a loaded comment.
In the urban setting,
yes,
the Rwandan women have proved themselves to be probably even better than men very many times in the jobs that they do. We don't need quota systems in the urban settings. Thank you.
I will try not to respond to that.
I think we're going to quickly go to a Twitter feed. We have some tweets coming in. Thank you for sending your tweets. And the first tweet we have is from Yolande Makolo, who says that, first tweet says, Ugandan authorities are mistreating and hurting Rwandans with impunity, but continue to push with their media a false border issue narrative. If they stop harassing and torturing Rwandans, there'd be no border issue. Second tweet from the same person, Yolande Makolo, also says that, and the paranoia of Ugandan authorities about Rwandans spying on them, even though none of the abducted Rwandans have been charged with spying, just reconfirms that they're actively plotting against Rwanda using known detractors and terrorists. We are still reading your tweets. Thank you very much. We have a tweet from Mike Busa. Yolande was earlier on talking about the Luanda MOU agreement. This is to do with Rwanda's rebranding. This is from Mike. Charles, last week you said he's tweeting all the way from Australia.
Yes, and he actually sent me a text and said he would be around visiting Rwanda around this time.
Nice.
And he'd like
should probably have him as a guest on the square.
Yes.
So Mike Busa says that, if you can just go back to his tweet, Mike Busa's tweet says that the idea behind rebranding is to create a different identity for a brand. Thanks to our leadership, this is happening and at a very good pace. As Rwandans, how do we translate, embrace, exploit our new brand in our everyday life? It's still a long way to go. Something needs to be done. And Brenna, before we go to our next tweet, this is what you were talking about in terms of, actually internalizing and applying those values that we rebrand, that we use as Rwandans. We have a tweet from Carrera Rehema. Rehema, I think, is talking with what we picked up on cleanliness. She says they act shocked about our cleanliness. Same way they say, how come you speak good English? Is it your first language? And they go ahead and add, isn't Rwanda a French-speaking nation? These comments sicken me, a combination of both ignorance and arrogance. I think Rehema is really, she's impassioned about some of these assumptions. We have a couple of tweets coming in, but I just wanted to ask very quickly, Brenna and Charles, do you want to weigh in on some of those tweets? Rehema, Yolande, and Mike.
I travel fairly frequently to Congo, Brazzaville, in the town of Point Noir. And this time I'm doing a presentation at a company, and a guy asks me, but how come you speak French? Didn't Rwanda chase away the French? So I told him I speak French because I can speak French.
I didn't know you speak French.
Yeah.
But Charles, your French is injured. Is it really good?
Well, let's just put it this way.
You can speak it.
I can speak French better than the two of you combined.
Okay. Our last tweet is from someone who tweets quite often on the square. Really appreciated. Richard says, honestly, no one has a moral right to critic or accuse Rwanda in its rebranding strategy when they do not provide a valid alternative. Thank you. Most of these guys or organizations were simply useless when it came to the genocide or DRC issues. Simply ignore. Brenna, like you said, we move. We move. Charles, you weighed in on some of these tweets. Loaded punchline. Brenna, can I have yours before we end the show?
Yeah, I think we need to put a human face to what's happening, and
happening
between Uganda and Rwanda.
Yes.
The human face. The families that are still waiting for their loved ones, that haven't heard from them. The families that have to receive their loved ones when they're deformed for the rest of their lives. The families that have
and the fact that this is not retaliatory.
Yes, and the families that...
We're not retaliating, so to speak.
And, the families that wake up and they tell them, oh, your brother or sister has been dumped at the border.
So putting a human face.
Yeah.
Because that trumps everything.
Yeah.
It trumps everything.
We cannot have any other discussion.
Yes, until that stops.
Yeah.
Well, I agree. Charles, Brenna, always a pleasure. Unfortunately, the show has come to an end. Burning Issues Edition 6. We'll be doing Burning Issues Edition 7 the last Wednesday of December. So please keep on sending us your views, your suggestions on what you'd like us to discuss. Thank you for tuning in to our partners, Uzi Collections and Bourbon Coffee. Thank you very much for your constant support. Thank you for tuning in. Have a good night and see you next week.